It was a massive fight between Charlo and Castano. More controversial scoring, if you want to call it that, Paulie. What did you make of the fight as a whole?
This could be the start of a really, really cool rivalry that really boxing fans will remember for a while.
We're going to forget about the news. It is almost time for the Olympics. We're going to be having a look at Team GB and Team USA. When you're looking at some of the greatest fighters to win the Olympics,
Sugar Ray Leonard and Muhammad Ali come to mind right away. Andre Ward comes to mind right away. Oscar De La Hoya, even the robbery Roy Jones that he should have had a gold medal,
This week we have Joyce against Carlos Takam.
Yeah, it's like a ramrod, man. It's like a
bam,
tree trunk
bam.
just bashing you,
Yes, people, I am Savage Dan.
I'm Paulie Malignaggi.
You are watching Mouthpiece, the official boxer podcast. Welcome back to Mouthpiece. I'm Savage Dan.
And I'm Paulie the Magic Man Malignaggi.
As always, guys, you know the drill. Like, comment, subscribe, leave comments. Send us videos of you sparring, your gym setup, your training, everything. Me and Paulie want to judge it. Straight on to this weekend's fights, or let's just go for the main one. It was a massive fight between Charlo and Castano. More controversial scoring, if you want to call it that, Paulie. What did you make of the fight as a whole?
I thought the fight was competitive. I think Charlo being the hometown guy, he's got more of the world title belts. He was the guy who was being looked at. You probably, I'm not saying that's fair, but you probably have to beat him by a little bit more than just a short margin to get the decision. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying that's fair. I'm probably the only defending champion in his hometown that got robbed in his hometown, but in the Broner fight. But usually in this particular situation, it's harder to get the decision when you go to the guy's house, and especially in Texas. I mean, we know how that's always been a bit tricky for guys to go to Texas against Texan fighters. So I thought it was a good fight. I thought both guys really fought well. I thought Castano brought the fight more to Charlo, but I didn't think Charlo did a bad job with his jab and just maintaining range in certain key spots of the fight. I'd probably slightly edge to Castano, but a draw is not the end of the world. I've seen worse decisions, especially considering Texas. And I think the only tragedy would be if they don't do the rematch. If somehow there's a way that this rematch doesn't get made. I think Castano is a real budding kind of a star guy because he's got all the ability. He's appealing in his fighting style as well. He's exciting. Mm-hmm. Seems to be able to punch a little bit. And I also think that, I think they've been keeping him down a little bit too much now. I remember the draw with Lara. That was a couple, 2-3 years ago. That was already his coming out party, But it's like people they're not promoting him the way he should be. They're not putting him out there the way he should be. We already saw him in the Lara fight that he was a dangerous guy. And that was, I was still working at Showtime when that fight happened. So, it's been a while, So by this point, he should have been getting his shots and have been getting the recognition. We know he beat Teixeira for the WBO title, but really, he's not been getting talked about in the manner that I feel like he should be. And Jermell, obviously, is a top-level fighter. I think this could be the start of a really good rivalry. I believe they should make a rematch, and if it's another good fight, whoever gets a decision should give the loser a rematch, regardless. I think this could be the start of a really, really cool rivalry that really boxing fans will remember for a while. I think it was that kind of fight. Really, really sharply well-fought fight.
Yeah, it looked like a competitive fight all the way through. Castano was putting on a lot of pressure, just trying to remain on the front foot. I feel like that's half the battle when you're fighting either one of the Charlo brothers. If they take center, it's difficult for you.
If you let them dictate with the jab too much, they're going to get too comfortable, and they're going to start putting you on the end of right hands as well. Castano, for my liking, he could probably jab a little bit more. He tries to kind of flex his way in, push his way in. Yeah. But at the same time, he doesn't just follow you around the ring. There are guys who just put these earmuffs up and just follow you around the ring and never get to you against a jabber and a guy with good legs. But Castano is really adept at cutting off the ring. So while he wasn't jabbing as often as I would have liked to see him, he really was able to still close the gap with that cutting off of the ring. And then he'd whip in some hard shots when he was much closer, and it created some good exchanges. Credit to Charlo. Round 2 was a terrific catch and shoot where he caught Castano's right hand and just rocked back with his own left hook and caught Castano's attention. And it's funny, the irony is in round 3, he tried the same thing. When he got hit with the initial left hook from Castano, he was trying to come back with his own hook, but it was a little bit too wide because Castano threw a right-hand hook. And so he tried to catch and shoot on the right hand with his own hook, just like he'd done in the round before. But his left hook came just a little too wide. I mean, it wasn't wide. It was just a little wider than it needed to be. And Castano was able to follow up his own right hand with the hook that landed first. And it got Charlo's attention. But Charlo tried to catch and shoot again on Castano's follow-up. And he missed up. He messed up again. Castano got there again. First, and it almost ended up dropping Charlo. So really the scientific nuances of the exchanges in the fight was really, really interesting, really, really high level stuff. Even from a psychological perspective, both guys had to feel each other's power. Both guys had to, have the wherewithal to stay in the fight and try to win it, try to keep winning it, try to stay competitive. The tragedy would be not making this fight again. This was a really good fight. I enjoyed it.
If you're Charlo, do you almost become a little bit of a victim of your own success going into that fight, seeing as you are the home fighter, you are the favourite, you're the most known fighter of the two, you're in your home, you're in your hometown. Do those kind of things maybe make the neutral look at a fight with more of a, Castano goggles on? Because I find myself watching fights where I know there's an overwhelming favourite, and I look more for the success of the away fighter. Yeah, and
you double it in your head, and I think that's why a lot of people are saying this was a robbery. Listen, if I'm gonna hedge it to somebody, I'd probably slightly edge to Castano, but it's not as much of a robbery as you might think. In my eyes, but I do think it is a deserving of a rematch type of fight, and I think possibly the rematch could be deserving of a third fight. I think that's that kind of it's that kind of a style blend where both guys are really high level and both guys can really make for a fun little rivalry here. Charlo is the star of the moment. Sure, him and his brother have rightfully gotten their place among the elite of boxing, and everybody kind of knows them. Funny thing about Argentinians, they always have to come and do this the hard way. They always come and kind of just show up in people's hometowns or people's home countries, and they just kind of have to get themselves found out in a difficult way. They never kind of just show up with all the fanfare and they're the A side right away. They're always showing up. I can remember Marcos Maidana going to in Germany, fighting Andreas Kotelnik, and he lost a close decision, but it allowed him to kind of start getting some notoriety. And then Golden Boy used him as an opponent for Victor Ortiz, and he knocked out Victor Ortiz. He wasn't supposed to win that fight, so he kind of had to
fight. What a fight!
So he kind of had to push his way in that manner. Really, even before our time, Carlos Monzon did this to Nino Benvenuti. I remember my family telling me about the Benvenuti-Monzon fight, and they were saying how Monzon just showed up to Italy, and he was saying how he's going to knock this champion out, and the Italians were like, who is this weirdo? Where this guy come from? He's not going to touch Benvenuti. Benvenuti's like the star, the hero, and he came in and just walloped him, and I think he even beat him in the rematch, and they fought again, and he beat him again. So it seems like Argentines don't really get the notoriety sometimes they deserve and they need. They sort of show up as
it's a football crazy country, so I feel like boxing is always going to play second fiddle.
Yeah, and so they don't
Lionel Messi's around.
Yeah, and so they don't get the following. Even Sergio Martinez, I can remember Lou DiBella telling me he got Sergio Martinez for free because nobody wanted him. Yeah, and he winds up getting the star out of the equation. So it's sort of a shame because Argentina seems to produce some good fighters, some in their spots. Even Carlos Baldomir came over here and upset Zab Judah. They produce some good fighters, some sturdy fighters. They all seem to be very mentally strong. Real tough. Like you're not gonna break them just for putting them in a tough fight. They actually seem to enjoy that and seem to want to love the challenge of trying to break you, which a lot of them do show up and do that. So it's from one perspective, Charlo becomes a victim of his own success. From the other perspective, Castano becomes what is your stereotypical Argentinian fighter in that they come out of their country and they've got to do it the hard way, and he's doing it, and he's been doing it the hard way, and he'll probably have to continue to do it the hard way. But I think real boxing fans appreciate this kind of fighter, and I hope that in appreciating boxing in general, that boxing does the right thing and makes this rematch, because this is the one to make.
If there's any justice in the world, we will get that rematch, and probably we'll get the third, seeing as it's PBC and there's not a huge pool of fighters to fight anyway. So I'm pretty sure, fingers crossed, we get the rematch.
Yeah, and it's also for the undisputed title.
Yeah, exactly. In the news this week, we're going to forget about the news. It is almost time for the Olympics. We're going to be having a look at the UK we're going to be having a look at Team GB and Team USA, working out who's on the squad, who's got the best chance of medaling, and who has the best chance of turning pro and being a success as well. Because as everyone should know by now, amateur boxing and professional boxing is almost two different sports. Paulie, as an amateur, what were it's obviously the same sport, but it's very, very different in the way you approach a fight. I'm guessing in terms of training and in terms of how you attack the fight. Obviously, amateurs is 3 threes. It's hell for leather. It's fast paced. It's pretty much the fitter man wins all the time. The busier man wins. How does that change, and what changes when you are turning over and going pro?
I mean, in my day, it was very much about the busier guy. It was very much about, just scoring as many points as you could in the amateurs, right? Damage didn't get counted as much as it does in the pros. Not that boxing wasn't damaging in the amateurs. I mean, you take a good shot, you'd feel it even in the amateurs, Yeah. But I'd say I'm not sure about the modern day amateurs because they have no headgears, and it seems that they've changed the scoring system away from the computer once again, So I'm not exactly sure if as far as the huge, as big of a gap between pro and amateur boxing, but there's still definitely a gap because you've still got to time yourself and pace yourself differently with the amateur rounds to the pro rounds and whatnot. So, you start to kind of have to make that evolution once you turn pro. For me, it was just sort of a natural evolution. I was starting to spar more rounds, so therefore you start to naturally pace yourself differently. You're starting to, I was always sparring pros, even from the amateurs, I was sparring pros. But, I always had a faster pace to me. Not as fast as some guys. I always had a good jab that could allow me to dictate and control my opponent. But nonetheless, you realize that you always knew that the need for a good pace, Yeah. But the computer forced you to pick your shots carefully, pick your shots right, because otherwise they wouldn't even get counted anyway. I remember, amateur boxing is sort of a mystery, because I remember people telling me, oh, you got to just be busy, And then you're busy and you get no points anyway if the guy's just got his earmuffs on, like with the computer. It was so the weirdest thing, So you still had to make your shots count. I always found success controlling the other opponent with the jab, because if the other opponent, sometimes a good jab would get a scoring blow, but also what the jab would do was prevent the other guy from setting up any offense himself for him to score points on you. Also, I found that sharp counter shots were really, they got the attention of the judges, and they would, they would press the button because it was, it was a clear landed shot, as opposed to when you initiated, a lot of times you'd partially land, and those judges are all 150 years old. They don't always see what they're pressing, So I always found that good counter punching was scored very well. But now, you sort of got a pro boxing judging style a little bit in the amateurs. You have no headgears. So damage, I think, still comes into play, but you got short rounds, and it's hard to separate short rounds. It's hard to separate two world-class fighters when they're fighting short rounds, because now, let's face it, you're at the Olympics, it's all world-class fighters, it's all world-class boxers. So there's still some adjustments to be made between the amateurs and the pros. I think, for me personally, it was the evolution came naturally. I remember people telling me, oh, you can't do this pity pat stuff. You got to sit down on your shots. Otherwise, you're just not going to hurt your opponent, and you're not going to. And I remember thinking, well, listen, it's boxing and it's boxing. It's both boxing. Yes, it's not a different sport, but it's different mentality in some way, right? Yeah. I said, if I just try to change too much, I'm going to get myself beat. I said, let me just do what I've been doing that's been successful. And I'll naturally adjust to what I see, and that's kind of how I made my adjustment into the pros. I never was a big puncher in the pros either, so a lot of my mechanisms that won me fights in the amateurs, I took to the pros and just kind of matured them a little bit more. Different mindset with longer fights and longer rounds and stuff. But overall, I mean, your success in the amateurs can translate to the pros, as long as you are not overthinking it. That's from what I gathered from my experience, because a good boxer is a good boxer, and this is still boxing.
I'm not sure what it's like in the USA, Paulie, but here it definitely feels like the fitter fighter, the one that's busiest, the one that kind of just throws more punches is the one that's more successful in the amateurs. Obviously, that doesn't always translate over to the professional ranks. But what's the system like in America? Is there a distinct difference between amateur gyms and amateur fighters and pro ones?
Well, the thing I know in Italy, and I'm not sure how it is in the UK, but in Italy, you have gyms that are specifically just for amateurs. In the US, you really don't have that as much. I mean, you might have some PALs that have some for kids that teach boxing, but a lot of the PALs, once those kids turn pro, those guys sometimes still keep training there, so you still got pros there. You've mostly come up in gyms that have mixed amateurs and pros in the U.S., and that's why a lot of the American fighters kind of always have that American, that pro boxing style, even as amateurs. When you make a high level when you reach a high level as an amateur, you'll go with the national team, and they'll sort of try to adjust you a little bit, but your core, your base style still remains what it is, so I think that's why a lot of the American amateurs end up, making pretty good pros for the most part through the years. Even though a lot of times the U.S. Olympic team hasn't had the success it used to have, a lot of those guys end up becoming pretty good pros. It's just without the medals, you don't get the fanfare. It's a weird phenomenon. It's all media. It's all perception. It's all psychology, really, because you look at somebody like Demetrius Andrade, who, for me, was a really, really stellar amateur, and in his prime as a pro was a really stellar pro, but never got the recognition. But had he won a gold medal, maybe he would have. Then again, Andre Ward won a gold medal. I don't think he ever got the recognition he deserved. But sometimes maybe it's because people want you to be controversial, and Andre was kind of always a straight up guy, too real, too straight up for everybody, and in this generation, unfortunately, controversies sell more than real people, so I don't know. At the end of the day, I think that, American boxing has its style because of the mixture, we at least when I was an amateur, I remember when I was an amateur, I go to my tournaments and they say, oh, you got to throw as many punches as you can, but we had the computer scoring system, and you'd throw as many punches as you can, but if the guy had earmuffs on it, had the earmuff defense, you wouldn't get any scoring blows, So I always found that, for me, my style in the amateurs was successful when I had my jab going, not because the jab was scored all the time, because it wasn't, but what the jab would do was a good jab would prevent the other opponent from being able to set up scoring shots himself. It would just keep him on the back foot. It would keep him defensive. It would keep him from being able to set up anything he wanted to. And I also noticed that clean counter shots were very effective in scoring because they're so easy for the naked eye to see. A lot of times when you were leading, you'd catch some partial glove, or you catch some partial arm, or you wouldn't necessarily get the points you deserved, especially with these judges being 150 years old each, and then they weren't even able to see or press the button in time, So the computer scoring system could be frustrating in a lot of ways. But I think now I can't judge it because they've gone away from the computer. They've got more of a pro boxing judging system, and they got no headgears. But you still have the shorter amount of rounds, and it's hard to separate world-class fighters in just a short amount of rounds. That's why in the pros, when world-class fighters fight, they're waiting until they're fighting 10 and 12 rounders. Because now you've got short fights in the Olympics. You're trying to separate these world-class fighters, and you've only got a few rounds to do it. So the onus still comes on being busy. Now you don't have the computer, so being busy might work to your favor, even more so than before. But I can't say that there's a very specific way to win in the amateurs because they're always changing the system. They're changing the criteria constantly.
It's always changing.
And it's very confusing. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember actually watching, I think it was Errol Spence. I think he went out quite early in one of the Olympics, whichever Olympics it was.
Yeah, I think he went out in the quarters as well in 2012.
Yeah. I think actually he might have had a decision overturned in the first round or something, but I remember looking at him, I'm remembering his style. It might not work here, but I knew that was, as soon as he turns pro, that was going to work. I just knew it was going to. And then there are some amateurs where you look at their style and you just know this might not translate into the pros because they're not punching with any real conviction. It's just about scoring and getting out of there. Doesn't always work over 12 rounds.
And you do, and a lot of times it is like that. But sometimes some of those guys, they're able to make the adjustment, I remember seeing Felix Diaz win the Olympic gold medal for Dominican Republic. I don't remember. I think it was 2004, 2008. I'm not sure, but he won it at a light welter. And I remember thinking, I just think this guy got a good draw. I don't think he was as good as he should have been.
Yeah.
You know, like but then I remember him in the pros. He developed pretty well. And he actually, I started to like his style as he developed more and more in the pros. He still didn't pan out though. He didn't win a championship.
Yeah.
But I felt like in the pros he actually adjusted his style and did well. He just came up short against I think it was Lamont Peterson. But you know, I don't know the ins and outs of his career at this point. But I mean, I remember as a pro, I started to realize like. At first, like I'm not crazy. I'm not, even though this guy's a gold medalist, I'm not crazy about how far he might go. But then I actually started to be convinced. You know, I said I thought I saw the adjustments in his style, but in the end, it still didn't work out for him like it should have at least.
Right, let's have a look at this GB men's squad. So it starts with Fraser Clark at super heavyweight. We've got Chevron Clark at heavyweight. Now I'm guessing that those two are brothers. I'm gonna guess. I don't actually know. The next two I'm about to name are brothers. That's Pat McCormack at welterweight and Luke McCormack at lightweight. You've got Ben Whittaker there at light heavyweight, and then you've got Peter McGrail at featherweight, and you've got 𝘮𝘯𝘪𝘭𝘮 at flyweight. And if you recognize that name, it's because he's had two brothers that have both gone to the Olympics as well, 𝘮𝘯𝘪𝘭𝘮 and 𝘮𝘮𝘯𝘪, and this sounds similar to both of them. As this 𝘮𝘮𝘯𝘪.
Fighting your thighs.
That's it. They're fighting your thighs. And they're all good and they're all slick. Now, I remember Fraser Clark from the amateurs years and years and years ago. And I feel like he's been an amateur for an absolute age. But I'm guessing he was just waiting for the smoke to clear from the likes of AJ and Joyce. It seems like Great Britain always seem to champion one heavyweight at a time per Olympics. But he's been mixing in good company for years. I'm talking 10 years now. I thought he would have actually turned over beforehand, but it seems like he's waited for this. And everyone's right behind him. He's a big puncher and he's quite slick for a heavyweight as well, so he's got a good chance. Pat and Luke McCormack, they're Sunderland fighters, and up there they're always fit. Always fit. That's gonna do you some good in there as well. But the name that kind of comes off the paper at you, probably because the brothers are pros now, is 𝘮𝘯𝘯𝘪𝘭𝘮, who I'm guessing is going to be as slick as his brothers and go in there and try and medal. There's something special about watching these fighters start their journey from the Olympics. Guys, do it. If you're trying to get into boxing, watch these fighters from the Olympics and watch their entire journey and see how they progress. There's something about it, like Paulie just said, there was a fighter he didn't quite like, but then after a while you start rooting for them as they go up and go through the ranks. The GB women are Lauren Price, Caroline Dubois, who's obviously the sister of Daniel Dubois, Caris Artingstall, sorry if I butchered that, and Charlie Davidson at flyweight as well. And if I'm totally honest, for such a small country or such a small island, we seem to send out very good boxers every 4 years to the Olympics. We seem to do better than we should if you're looking at a world map. Boxing has become one of the sports that we medal in the most. And even if you don't recognize some of the names on this paper and you've never heard of them before, you can bet your bottom dollar that they are good. Paulie, do you know who's in this USA squad? Anyone?
I'm not totally familiar with USA squad at this point. I haven't followed the amateurs in a while.
We'll go through the names, and just from the names, it looks like there's good fighters.
Keyshawn Davis, he's a kid that I've heard his name thrown around a little bit.
He's in there. He's in there at lightweight. You've got Richard Torres Jr., super heavyweight. Delante Johnson at welterweight and Troy Isley at middle. Do you think a lot of fighters are just getting the experience that they can get in the gym and just turning pro before?
I do. Once they took out the headgear, I do notice a lot of fighters in the United States turning pro younger. It was something that I didn't notice as much when I was turning pro. You know, the age gap would be like 19, 20, 21, 22 to turn pro. But now I'm seeing a lot of 17, 18-year-olds turning pro, and I think it's because there's no headgears in the amateurs. They said, I guess they figure they might as well turn pro. It's funny because this was probably a thing in the 70s and early 80s. I can remember the ages of, not I can remember because I wasn't around, but I know the ages of a lot of fighters that turned pro in those times.
Yeah.
Were also very young, you know. And I guess it comes down to the headgears being removed in the amateurs, because once you put the headgears into the amateurs, guys were waiting a few extra years to turn pro. And now that the headgears have been removed, the American culture is suddenly now becoming once again to just turn pro instead of waiting for Olympic Games and whatnot. So I can, if I had to guess and make an educated guess on this, if I had to hypothesize, I'd probably give a lot to that credence.
And also, unless you've been living under a rock for the last however many years, America is God knows how many times bigger than the UK. So winning a Golden Gloves or a national championship over there is obviously going to be considerably harder than winning an ABAs over here. So I'm guessing just that level of workload is just making fighters want to turn pro as soon as they can. On the USA women's team, you've got O'Shea Jones, Rashida Ellis, Naomi Graham, and Virginia Fuchs. Again, not that many people are going to know those names, but you can bet your bottom dollar that if USA are only sending 4 men and 4 women, they're sending a real 4 men and 4 women.
Yeah.
Like, they are coming to do something. In terms of the Olympics as a whole, I feel like we spoke about it with regards to James DeGale, but it might be the holy grail of boxing in terms of as far as dreams go. You can win. We see how many weights there are and how many belts there are in each weight division, and super titles here and titles over there and regular titles and blah 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 blah. There is only one Olympic gold medal. It means a lot, and only one person can win it every 4 years. When you're looking at some of the greatest fighters to win the Olympics, are there any names that come immediately to your mind? Sorry.
Sure. Sugar Ray Leonard and Muhammad Ali come to mind right away.
Yep.
Andre Ward comes to mind right away. Oscar De La Hoya, you know.
Yep.
Even the robbery Roy Jones that he should have had a gold medal, you know. It's,
same with Floyd Mayweather as well.
Same Floyd Mayweather as well. Yeah. So you know, the gold medalists come to mind, but when you start thinking about gold medalists, you start thinking about the politics that took away gold medals from guys that probably deserved the gold medals as well. You know.
Yeah.
And of course,
George Foreman.
George Foreman,
Joe Frazier as well.
Joe Frazier, yeah, absolutely. You know, big deal, guys. And of course, you know, James DeGale, who's a friend of mine as well. You know, I gotta mention this because you mentioned James just now. I want to let everybody know out there if there's any help that can be done, because James got his gold medal robbed. His family was watching the European Cup final, England and Italy, at a venue or at a place, and nobody was home at the house. And his house was ransacked. His parents' house was ransacked and robbed. And they took the safe and with a lot of valuables, and his Olympic gold medal was in there. You know? Was this Euro finals? This Euro final, yeah. Last week, yeah. So you know, I was speaking to James, and he let me know all this. So you know, if anybody has any, I mean, I know it's a long shot, but it's just such a terrible thing to get taken from you. You know, if anybody has any information at all, I mean, about the whereabouts of this gold medal, I mean, really, you know, get to authorities and get it back to him, man. That thing is not valuable to anybody else except James.
Exactly.
If you didn't win the gold medal, it shouldn't be of any. It has no meaning to you, you know.
Yeah.
And to the person that won the gold medal, it means more than any money can buy. You know. So you know, they should really, I would hope that, you know, the people that if people that took it, if they have any sort of semblance of conscience,
Humanity.
you know, that is not the thing to take. You know, I understand, you know, people rob things and people sell things, but the gold medal is not of value to anybody else except the person that won it. So if anybody has any information, please, you know, do your due diligence about the whereabouts of James' gold medal.
Definitely.
That's all. I had to put that out there, sorry.
You have to. Yeah, that's shocking, man. That's absolutely crazy. One of the biggest shocks that you will hear now, but might not have been a shock at the time, is that Sean Porter in the Olympics beat Alexander Usyk. I'm sure that happened, right? That did happen.
Which one? Well,
Was it Sean Porter beat Usyk?
No, not Sean Porter. It was. I'll tell you who beat Usyk. It was an Italian though. Clemente Russo.
Hold on, let me have a
Porter wasn't an Olympian. Porter didn't make the Olympics.
Was it? Hold on.
Porter was a top amateur in the USA. I know Clemente Russo beat.
No, wait, it wasn't the Olympics. I think it was the Worlds. It was one of these. But Usyk lost to Sean Porter. Imagine that. Do you know how crazy that is?
Yeah.
In 2006, they both fought at 165.
Yeah,
Mental.
and Porter was at 165 for a long time, so I can believe that, you know. I remember Usyk in the 08 Olympics losing to Clemente Russo, who was an Italian, right, in the quarterfinals. And I remember Clemente had lost to Clemente was just one of those Italians who never turned pro. And I remember in 04 Clemente had lost to Andre Ward. Then he moved up to the heavyweight division, and in 08 he gets to the finals. But on his way to the finals, he beat both Alexander Usyk and Deontay Wilder. He beat Usyk in the quarters and Deontay in the semis. And then he lost in the finals, right? So if Russo, think about it like this: we have always had our what ifs about the Olympics. If Usyk had beaten Russo, we would have had Usyk against Wilder in the Olympic semifinals in 2008. Right. But Russo ended up beating Usyk first in the quarters, and then he ended up beating Wilder in the semis, and then he got to the finals and he lost. Ironically for Russo, he goes back to the Olympics in 2012 because he never turned pro. And he reaches the finals of the 2012 Olympics against who? Alexander Usyk. But this time, Usyk beats him. So Russo has 2 silver medals. And Usyk gets the gold medal. And Usyk is a guy who had lost him 4 years ago, but forced Russo to settle again for second best in the 2012 Olympics.
Who's that? There is an Italian legend. I forgot his name. I'm sure he was a heavyweight. I have a feeling AJ might have fought him as well.
Super heavy, yeah. Roberto Camarelli.
What a fighter.
Yeah.
I remember watching him and thinking, oh my gosh, what a fighter.
He won the 08 Olympics and he lost the 2012 finals to AJ. Yeah. But there was always talk about him turning pro. Italy in some ways runs a little bit of communist style in that you're on the police boxing team and you have a salary for life if you don't turn pro. So you have and you won't have to work in the streets. You won't have to go arrest people. They'll just give you an office job in the police station for life until you retire. You know, so a lot of guys, they'd rather not risk their position by turning pro. And then, you know, in the pros it's a crapshoot sometimes. You know, it's you may make millions or you may make nothing, but then you don't have any job to turn back to. So a lot of guys don't turn pro. But with Clemente Russo, he was getting offered millions to turn pro. And I heard that he ended up having like some back problems, some back issues, and it was just like, you know what, I'm not gonna risk it turning pro with these back issues, and you know, maybe it doesn't work out for me. So he stayed in the amateurs for a little while longer, and now he's just retired, and he's got the office job at the police station. So
there you go.
He's good. He's got a stipend. He's got a stipend for life. Roberto Camarelli.
Let's get on to the prediction for this week. We have Joyce against Carlos Takam. I'm not sure if you've been seeing what's happening in the boxing news this week, but apparently Babic and Joyce had one spar that was apparently like the whole gym was just gobsmacked watching it. Apparently it was the craziest spar that anyone's ever seen.
And did anybody record it? So
I'm guessing it's been. I haven't got the recording, but I'm guessing.
Everybody records everything nowadays. It's funny. Yeah. This was like normal. This was like a normal Tuesday in Gleason's gym when I was a kid. You know, the 2 world champions would be sparring and they'd be killing each other, and you'd have sparring sessions that discussed weekly, daily in that gym. Yeah. Now it's like it happens and it's like, oh my god, because people recorded it, and so now people are talking about it. This was like a normal. This was like, oh yeah, that's a Thursday afternoon in Gleason's gym. Back in the day, but now it's like it's crazy. Like things come out, things leak, things. You know, you have
they
more
were
technology.
Both happy to talk about it. Babic did an interview where he was just basically saying, listen, that was a warrior spar, like a crazy spar. Joyce is heavy-handed. He's one of the toughest people I've ever sparred. And basically he's saying he is more than ready for Takam. Now, Takam's obviously not any joke. He's somebody who's going to bring it. He's going to bring the fire. He is small for a heavyweight, and Joyce is quite a big lad for a heavyweight. Do you see any potential banana skin, any upsets? Do you see anything? I can only see a Joyce.
You know, obviously, I'm picking Joyce to win, but I'm curious to see the manner in which he wins, because Takam has always been a guy a little bit tricky and can be a little bit tricky to look good against. You know, he made I think he won 12 with AJ, didn't he? Or he went into the late rounds with AJ at least.
11, I think it was. It might have been 12.
Yeah, and And I don't even know if the stoppage was that crazy of a stoppage when he fought AJ, you know? So you know, Takam can be a little bit of a banana skin in the way of that he's tricky, he can make you look bad, he's durable in there. So he's a good guy to keep gaining experience from, especially that he's also a guy who, you know, who's a contender. You know, he's a top 10, top 15 guy, you know, so he's respectable as well. So I'm curious. You know, it's hard to pick against Joyce in the fight, but I'm curious to see how he handles it in comparison to how everybody else handled it. You know, so that's more so what I'm looking for.
The one thing that Joe Joyce does have that I think is underrated is a jab. Now it's not
heavy jab,
the most beautiful jab to look at, but it's effective and it's constant. It's like a semi-automatic. It's crazy.
It's like a ramrod, man. It's like a tree trunk just bashing you. You know.
And it doesn't ever seem to stop either. So if anything's gonna offset the attack of Takam, it's gonna be something like that. Although he does like to creep in underneath the jab, so it's gonna be a clash of styles. But I'm gonna be brave, and seeing as I almost got it with that last prediction with the split decision, with the majority decision I gave to Charlo, I'm gonna go with a stoppage. I think Joe Joyce is gonna get to him eventually. I feel like I'd say it will take a while, but I think he gets to him.
Yeah, I'd say about 8th round stoppage or so for Joe Joyce. I'm curious to see again how he handles that little crabbing style of Takam when he ducks in. I remember Lloyd Lennox Lewis used to deal with these guys. He used to just push their heads down and hit them with uppercuts.
That's it.
Push their head. But not everybody always realizes that with a shorter guy, you can just push his head down and keep your head, keep him low. That way he can't come up. You know, it protects you from getting hit with the hook, and it also sometimes you can sneak in a sneak uppercut in there as well.
Yeah, the one thing he's just going to have to watch out for is that kind of tricky overhand right. It should, I'm guessing he's trained for it all camp. But that's the only real way I can see Takam causing any upsets in this fight is by kind of sneaking around the corner and getting a right hand way over the top. Without that, I just can't see it. But boxing's stranger stories than this have happened.
That's why they fight the fights.
Cool. I think that is it for us this week. As always, remember to like, comment, subscribe, send us videos, all of that. Keep up to date with the boxing news. Watch the Olympics, do all of that, and we will see you next week. Yes, people, I am Savage Dan.
I'm Paulie Malignaggi.
You are watching Mouthpiece, the official boxing podcast.
We are two of the most knowledgeable, two of the most charismatic, biggest personality guys in boxing, and we are two of the coolest cats talking about the sport today.